in St. Andrew's Community Center. Please join us there any Friday. On third Fridays, we have a Shabbat dinner at 6:15 p.m. Reservations can be made at our website, www.eitzchayim.org. You can stay up to date with us at our website or on Facebook. Lots of different ways to check in with Congregation Eitz Chayim. Again, a welcoming, inclusive Jewish home on the Treasure Coast, just for you to join us and enjoy your Jewishness and renew your inner Jew at Congregation Eitz Chayim. Hi, this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Congregation Eitz Chayim, inviting you to join us any third Friday for our Shabbat dinner. The dinner starts at 6:15 and it's $26. It includes chicken, brisket, salmon, and a vegan option. Please join us any third Friday at 6:15. Services follow at 7:30 p.m. at 295 Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard at the corner of Irving in the Community Center of St. Andrews. Please do join us. Rabbi Shafir Lobb.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 10:08 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. And I think sprinting in from the parking lot, and we'll see if she is in cellular purgatory. Oh, that's it. How are you?
I am doing well, and you're right. I am walking in, and thank you, Carol, for the open door.
Oh, my. It is absolutely wonderful to...
Have this technology? It is.
Oh, it's working. It's working.
It's working. Yay, world.
Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah, all these things that we normally I take for granted. And so what can I say? It's what it is, you know? Want to start the world in an interesting place and way. So
there you go. Well, hey, it's we're all busy, and you more than most people. That's for sure.
Well, I get that.
So, have you hit the New York Times bestseller list yet on your book?
No, but we have made it to number 150 best-selling list.
Great.
In applied psychology. So. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, kind of thrilled about that one.
There you go. Well, hey.
Thank you, Amazon, for tracking that.
And everybody out there listening and driving around, buy our book.
Yeah, and what I don't have are my glasses. Oh, well.
Oh, no.
Don't worry. I'll be fine. Oh, man, I don't need them to drive.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I don't need them to drive,
That's
so
just,
that works out.
Carol's like that, too, so yeah.
All right.
Yeah, she just needs it to read, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to read anything. And then Cliff didn't type out any cue cards for you today.
I wouldn't read them anyway. But you know how that goes. Okay, somewhere in this mess, there we go, is the stand for Mr. Mevo.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
All these things that I normally do with great deliberance, and fortunately the good news is, as the military would say, you're practiced. Which means that it should theoretically, I daren't tempt fate, right?
In theory, this should work.
Yeah, it's worked, but it's also not worked on occasion.
So. Well, that's electronics.
Yeah,
that's
they are
right.
what they are. Let me move that back gently and see if I can do that without it falling. Well, let's see. Update available. I don't really want you to do that right now.
No.
We don't want to take the time to do that. So anyway, I'm hoping everybody is having an absolutely great Friday and surviving this heat.
Oh.
Because that is...
Well, as Jennifer Correa, the meteorologist, just said, it is going to feel like 100, but the over-the-air temperatures are lower, if that means much. It's
the opposite of Tucson, right? Because in Tucson it used to be that we would have 100 degrees and it would feel like 90.
Yeah.
And actually be fairly pleasant, although it has been warm there, I have heard.
You know, and just we have a few friends in Phoenix, and it's been awful there. And anybody who knows the Valley of the Sun knows that it is warmer there anyway because of all the concrete and stuff like that.
They've done everything that somebody said don't do in a desert.
That's right. Well, and they chopped down what trees they did have there, which were nice, and just bulldoze for houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then blacktop and
blacktop's
even worse than concrete.
Yes. Oh, far worse.
Let's absorb some heat. 'Cause I think that's one of the things that people don't understand is that heat is the energy, not cold. You feel cold because the warmth from you is being sucked out.
Mm-hmm.
So now I don't even know where it decided to put this.
She's trying to get her feed going here, folks.
Yeah, I am trying to do that.
Yeah.
It's not helping.
So, yeah, you are right. And
there it is.
I just wonder sometimes, like, putting your old Goodyear hat on.
Okay.
How in the world did you develop tires that could handle like 140 and 150 degrees, which is what that blacktop gets up to?
Oh, yeah, it does. It definitely gets that hot. There's no question. It gets very, very hot.
Yeah, and, you just think, boy, and these tires have to last 15,000 miles.
Well, they do, and I'm not the chemical engineer. The chemical engineers deal with what kind of rubber to assign. I was the mechanical, so I was more concerned with how do the pieces inside the tire give it the integrity to hold air, to do those kinds of things. I did a little bit of tread design here and there, but there are people who actually specifically work on tread design too.
Really?
So,
that's
that's
fascinating.
The tire has many, many different components. And my big job was to put all these pieces together.
Wow.
And have them work. Now, we did occasionally, and one of my patents is for tread design. Those are ornamental. Those are considered ornamental.
And, of course, you made millions off this patent.
Uh-huh.
So
not even a million thank yous.
I get that. Yeah. Well, so you signed basically the same type of document that Carol signed at NBC, that they own every likeness and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
And if you have a patent, it's theirs.
Yeah. And what they gave me is a small, I want to say about 3 by maybe 2, maybe 4 by 2. A little plaque. It's got the Goodyear logo on the front of it, and on the back, in writing that's maybe 8-point font, is the number from each of the patents, and they're just in a. And every time that you got a new patent, you turned in the plaque, and they engraved another number on it. So you didn't even get a new plaque for each patent. Yeah.
Oh no! All right.
Part of life.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You do what you have to do.
So they basically claim that they give you the platform to work from, and they own it.
Well, and they pay you to work.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's different from, say, let's compare it to the book that Dr. Strahan, and she said she should be here next week with me.
Cool.
But the difference there is that she and I didn't talk about or work on the book at work. We did it after. So, it was done using our home computers, meeting, talking, sending files back and forth, and doing that sort of thing. So it wasn't done, so yeah, that's the difference. If Kaiser had paid us, or IRC had paid us to make the book, that would have been a different thing. Not that we're going to get rich off of a book. We're not. It's not going to be like In Cold Blood with Truman Capote.
Huh.
No. I
No.
have no delusions. But I hope that it helps some people. And the book that he's talking about, folks, here's the plug, Hope. Yeah, good. Hope, Strength, and Healing. Right. A book on trauma.
Yeah.
So if you just Google trauma and Lobb, L-O-B-B, on Amazon, it'll come up for you. It's available on Kindle and in print, and we are in the process of making an audiobook for those who like to listen.
Wow.
So, yeah, but that takes a little bit of time because there's a lot of pages in there to read.
So where would that be found then once you
Audible
get
will
that done?
have the
Audible.
audiobook.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
So those of you who have Audible subscriptions like I do, you can use it for one of your credits.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, that actually is an amazing. When I don't do it now, but I used to teach at Vero, and the hike from my house to Vero campus was a good amount of time.
Yeah. Yes.
And so I would listen to audiobooks to and from the class.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, you figure your house, down by Becker up to Vero, that's a good 45-minute jaunt.
At least.
Yeah.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. If not a little bit
At least.
more.
It depends on traffic.
Yeah.
I used to have to allow basically an hour because, first of all, we all know that I clearly don't always leave on time.
Oh, that'll be fine when we move this place down to West Palm. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that wouldn't be.
No, that would not be fine for any of us. Oh, my goodness.
That's the wrong direction of traffic. Vero is bad enough.
Oh, yeah, and you're right. When you're heading south,
The traffic is just.
it's crazy.
There's a point you just start hitting it, and it's just huge.
Right at Jupiter.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden, we have 5 lanes of traffic. Perfect. 5 lanes going nowhere.
It's the kind of, well, every place has it, right? In Philadelphia, we called it the Schuylkill parking lot.
Yes.
Right, the Schuylkill Parkway.
The expressway.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's the I-10. And in Orlando, you've got the I-4.
Of course, in Jersey, the Jersey Parkway that has, is it like 12 lanes, and you can't move in any of them.
Yeah, in circles.
Wow.
I used to call Jersey the land of circles, traffic circles.
Well, yeah, that too, on service
Roundabouts.
streets. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Although Port St. Lucie's doing a good job of becoming the land of roundabouts.
Yes. I just saw the brand new one on Floresta. Yep. They just keep popping up.
And I hope that works for people, and I hope that people use them properly, because I don't see a lot of that happening. But I know the ones in tradition now have poles on them to try to force you into the correct lane so that you don't cut into each other.
Yeah, and I noticed somebody made it into the Stewart statue of the sailfish. It went straight. I just can't believe that. It's like, it's so large. How do you miss this? They did.
Texting.
Well,
That's a possibility, right?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah.
Because the problem with texting when you're driving, as my husband likes to say, that's just foolish. Because your eyes are not on the road. Those who think they've got a third eye that's going to watch the road are just not paying attention to their bodies.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to look down for long. They did a cool thing in some movie houses with people where they beeped their cell phones in their pockets, and in the second that it took them to look down, they put a crash up on the screen to try to teach people that you can't see things when you're looking down at your phone.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, well, and we're back in school again. So.
Yep, school starts again. It was interesting. I heard the comment about that more and more students are not showing up. The chronic truancy, right? The chronic non-attendance is sad in many ways. A lot of students are just not showing up, and it's apparently starting in school. And I know that we have a problem with it in college. And there's just too much data out there, folks. It says if you don't show up, you don't do well.
Obviously.
Yeah, well, you'd think it would be obvious.
Well, see, I'm the kind of student, being a marginal one at best, I had to be there because if the internet had been in existence back in the 60s, I would have been in real trouble.
Well, so, yeah, even on the internet, though, you have to show up.
Yes. Oh, sure.
The big thing that the internet, so I'm teaching 2 online courses this term, and I'm going to be posting videos, I'm going to be posting comments, all kinds of things on those classes. So you need to show up. You just need to.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, it's so funny. Yesterday, I was driving down Prima Vista from where where you're all set up there, and all of a sudden, the right lane by Bayshore stopped, and I drove. I was in the other lane. Drove up, and it was totally stopped, going over the bridge, turning right, and it was Renaissance Charter School.
Ah.
And that they were picking up, I guess, for the first time, and it was like, oh my goodness, this thing's backed up a half mile.
Oh, the lines for parents picking up children is huge anymore.
Yeah. But anyway, be careful if you're in a school zone. And
yeah, please do.
And I saw...
Those are precious things.
I saw it 2 days ago, and you figure, okay, or yesterday, I mean, on US 1, it makes no difference what side of the road you're on.
Yeah.
If there's a school bus with the arms out, stop.
Yep.
And we had a guy, I was right behind the bus, jam on his brakes and whip around us.
Mm.
I mean, there could be kids running across
Yeah.
US 1. Be careful.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, there could be kids running all over the place because they don't understand all the rules yet.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't an adult there.
Yeah, that's difficult.
Well, and we need to be adults around the school buses.
Yes, we do. We do.
That's really the simple bottom line. We need to be the adults because the kids are...
They're kids.
They're kids, and they're not stupid. They're just not developed in those areas yet. Because that's part of what surviving childhood does for you. It helps you learn those rules. Kids they're not a blank slate as John Locke thought they were, and others have taught that children are a blank slate and come into the world and everything that they know is learned after birth. That's not true. Kids learn even in the womb. They learn fear, they learn sounds, they learn many things transmitted through that, through the womb. And they learn to like certain music, they learn to recognize certain language, things like that. They come wired with certain ways of learning, certain ways of receiving information to facilitate that learning.
It's funny you say that about the music. I remember my mom telling me that I was almost dancing after I was born. My dad at the time was working at what used to be Decca Records, and primarily Count Basie and a bunch of big bands. And it seemed like I loved music right out of the womb. It was amazing.
And probably in the womb, whichever she visited.
Yeah.
And that's so. Some of that you may inherit from your father. Right? There may be a genetic preference for music of certain types. There's all kinds of things. We are just really at the beginning. It may feel to people like we've known this for a long time, but we really are just starting to get to the basics of how these things unpack. So we all get genetic material from our parents. And it's not 50-50, folks. Yes, initially it's the sperm and the egg, so the sperm from the father, the egg from the mother combine, and yes, there's 50% of the genetic material from each of those entities or things, and they combine to form the zygote. But then there's this kind of explosion, if you will. It's not really, but it's a disattaching of different things and then a rebuilding of the DNA inside that fertilized cell. And then it may get 54% from one parent and 46 from the other, or even more extreme, it recombines in new and novel ways. So no two people are the same. And even if you then go to twins, and you say, well, okay, that the twins divided after that little game of craps, right? So yeah, it's kind of like a crapshoot. And that you come back in and you see what you've got in the cells that are going to become the baby, and half of that becomes the baby and the other half supports the baby, becomes the umbilical cord and all of those things. So the body starts to take its material and divide into the stem cells and into the other different things that create a baby. And you never know what you're left with. And yes, the twins then are breaks from that. But the breaks are not always right down the middle. They just aren't. It's not it's not like somebody can take an X-Acto knife and precisely cut through. Different ones get slightly more of this or slightly less of that. Plus, not everything is in the genes. There's also genetic material that's the soup, if you will, in which the DNA strands sit.
And as you have mentioned in the past, even identical twins are not identical.
They're not identical, and part of it depends on how they split. They can be mirror twins. Those are rare. But a mirror twin, one will be right-handed, the other left-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because of how and where the cell splits. If it splits on the side or if it splits front to back. Or
I actually knew, a mirror
twins.
Mirror twins in high school, and they both were baseball pitchers. One was left-handed, the other was right-handed. Yeah.
So that's a mirror twin, and those are rare, but they do happen. And there's also twins where one will like music and one will like cooking. Who knows? Different things spark different interests at different times. And part of that's how your genetic material chooses to express itself. And it's not a conscious thing on the part of the child. You can have an influence on it, but it's not the be-all and the end-all. Life tosses us many different things. The side of the womb that the child sits on has an effect. So many different things. Yeah, we're just starting to understand a little bit of that. And so I just turned in a paper for my licensure on looking at my own life in terms of development theories. And it was actually, some of the assignments are quite interesting. I found that one to be quite interesting to do. And I can see the intentionality of my parents. My father, of course, being a psychologist, probably knew some of the theories that are out there. I'd have to look back to see exactly who said what when, because for me it's all history. But for him, some of it may not have been, and some of it may have been.
And, of course, this is back in the 80s, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
I'm trying to be nice.
I got it. And, perennially 29, right?
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Good theory. 39 if you're Jack Benny. That's bringing back memories, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, But I went through that, and I realized that one of the things that my parents used to do, because of course when I was a kid, we didn't have iPads and phones and things like that to toss the kid in the back seat of the car. But my father loved to drive. We would go on a drive and just find an out of the way restaurant and maybe have lunch or something. That was just one of the things that he liked to do. So he loved driving. He loved watching the scenery. But if you've got a small child, then you've got this little irritant in the back seat if you're not careful, because there's only so much sleep you can do. And what they used to do to keep me entertained was they would have me spell words.
Mm-hmm.
My parents would say a word, and I would have to tell them what it meant, use it in a sentence, and then spell it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And that served two functions. One, it kept me busy because I was thinking about things, so I wasn't fidgeting. I was doing something. And the other thing is it built vocabulary, and it built spelling skills. And the other thing that they used to do with me, which was math in my head. My father would just, take a number, or, take 3 and multiply it by 7 and do this and do that, and, what's the answer? And obviously he was working it as he gave it to me. But so that also kept me engaged, and it's probably part of why I like both math, and I love reading, and I love language, and I love writing.
Interesting. Wow. How old were you?
My memories go all as far back as I can remember. I remember doing that in the car.
Really?
So
Okay.
probably shortly after I started speaking.
Yeah.
And so it built the concept of language in many, many ways. And children actually are best equipped to learn language. A lot of research has gone into that. We have a time when we pick up languages. The brain has a language center in it that opens, and children can absorb language faster at that time than any other time in their life. It doesn't mean you can't learn a language. Like you and I could still start learning Chinese or something. Chinese is difficult because it's got a lot of sounds we don't have in English. We don't even have them in German or any of the other languages I've studied.
They're unique.
They're unique to the language. And so that's a little more difficult because you have to learn to hear those sounds. We just don't hear them. That's how Beijing becomes Peking, because of the way we hear things. And but we can do it, but it's much harder after that language center has stopped working at its highest efficiency.
Well, I know Carol was speaking 4 languages by the 4th grade.
Yeah, and that's the right time to do it. We wait much too long when we do this, wait until high school. The kids, they're not interested, they don't want it, they have to do it, and it shows.
It's so funny. It's, of course, FAU has a lab school with Palm Point in tradition. And when we go there for the Christmas Kids show and listen to this junior high school orchestra, wow. You close your eyes and you think you're listening to a big band.
Wow.
They're that good.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the math side of it all, and the teacher is teaching math as well as music, and it's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely phenomenal.
If we incorporated math into the various subjects into which it belongs, kids would pick it up a lot better than just having it centralized in one class.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's something that you're learning for its own sake, and it's much harder. But if you're saying, let's balance your checkbook, let's do this, let's do that, and it's tied into life skills, it's going to be much easier to absorb. Because one of the things that even young kids, we know this is true with adult learners, that adult learners learn better when they sense that they need the information that they're being taught.
Okay.
So
makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense. But even young kids, if they can use it, they will want to learn it more. So the intrinsic motivation is much higher.
See, I never, of course, I had 12, 13 years of Latin, and always wondered why. because I knew I would never use it. I wasn't going to be a pharmacist. So, it was like, okay.
And a pharmacist only needs about 15 to
15 words maybe. But, you just think, but it was the root of all the Romance languages, if you think about it.
Right. It's when I look at a sign written in Spanish. Well, Spanish I have a little bit of facility, but say French, which I never took in school, I can see the roots of some of the words, and I can fumble through some of it, but I'm just as likely to get a really off-the-wall thought of what it means. But yeah, there's some roots down in there, and then you've got Finnish, which is totally weird, closer to Hungarian than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Huns.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's and then the Baltic countries, and Russians.
Yeah,
that's a whole different.
It's a whole different set of languages. But here's a piece that's kind of interesting. Spanish has a lot of Arabic words in it because of the time when the Moors were in Spain.
Well, look at their architecture in Spain.
Absolutely. You can see the influence of it. And they've got guitars because of... Thank you, Arabs, for the guitars.
You're kidding.
No, and the clock movement that became known as Swiss clocks is also thanks to the Arabic influence, as is some of the early surgery procedures.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So when they came through, they were actually the centers of learning at the time, and left a lot of things for which they don't get credit, which is sad. And why would Muslims need clock movements? Because their prayers are before the sun is up. Two of their prayers are before and after the sun. So the early morning prayers before sunrise. You have to know what time it is to know when to pray. And the nighttime prayers are after.
There you go.
So you have to have a way of measuring time that isn't dependent on a sundial.
Wow. Okay.
And then you also have the concept coming in of the 24-hour day, because that wasn't biblical, folks. The Bible did not have 24 hours. It had watches of the day, and they were longer in summer and shorter in winter. And the watches of the night were the opposite. They were shorter in the summer and longer in the winter.
Sounds lunar to me.
Well, because 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness was the way that the original hours were broken up that way. They weren't standardized to 60 minutes until the concept of minutes came in. That wasn't around either. And then seconds comes after minutes. But these are all later developments. So time is a very interesting thing. You know that Stuart and I used to have all these discussions about whether or not God created the world in 24 hours, the universe in 24 hours. And, of course, that's hard to measure when you don't have a sun, moon, and stars until Wednesday. Okay. So, one of the things that I love to do in my classes with my philosophy students, is ask them to Google how long today is. Because today is probably not 24 hours. Today is probably 23 hours and some minutes, or 24 hours and some minutes, because the Earth is tilted and it wobbles. And a day is defined as a certain part of the planet reaching a certain orientation toward the sun. It's a definition. And it's arbitrary. And we wobble. You might not feel it, but the Earth wobbles as we rotate on our axis. We're just used to it.
Wow. Oh, by the way, prayers for friends of ours in Maui.
Absolutely. 55 dead, according to the news.
I have never heard of a hurricane 700 miles away with winds of 80 to 100 miles an hour that far away.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just open ocean.
It's open ocean, so there's nothing to interfere with it.
Oh, boy, that was horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, that was devastating to hear on the news on the way into the station. So my heart does go out to them. There's actually a couple that I believe are in Jupiter that had a home in Maui for a while. I'm sure that...
Hopefully it's on the other side of the island.
Yeah, I don't remember because they've been dealing with so many things in Hawaii. It's been a rough couple of years there.
Yes, it has. And I didn't realize that, of course, we always traveled to Kauai, and it always seems to be raining there. But it has been unusually dry on both Hilo and Maui. Kauai is pretty much normal. But, yeah, they had this on Fox last night on their 6 o'clock news, and it was fascinating to see the last 5 years how dry Maui has become.
When we say climate change, it's things that people might not think about. It's not just warmth, which, of course, we're in a heat wave. We're in a tremendous heat wave this summer. And my plants are all telling me about it. And then they get stressed by it. And they dry up, and they this and they that, and that becomes tinder for a fire if you're not careful.
And there was a story on the Scripps News the other night from our old station, KVOA, and it was talking about some of the saguaros in the Saguaro National Monument where their arms are literally falling off.
Because they can't sustain them.
Because they're so hot.
Yeah.
And it's like, really?
Yeah.
Because these things are hundreds of years old.
Yeah. And, well, that's their mechanism, right? If you can't support the arm, get rid of it. It's because they're trying to survive.
Yeah.
They're threatened. And I can remember walking, I want to say it was Sabino Canyon, but I'm not even 100% sure that's where it was. But I was talking with one of the docents, and they were talking about how water stressed the plants were that year because there wasn't much rain. And we are changing the planet, and it's going to respond in ways that we may not like because the whole planet is trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's a form of life or not, it's a system, and it tries to achieve a balance, stasis of some sort. And so it's doing what it can to try to cleanse the pollution, to try to make itself healthy again, just as our bodies try even when we pour horrible things into them. She said as she drank her coffee.
Yeah. Oh.
Right, so our bodies try to do what it can to react, and sometimes it's doesn't fire well. Right? It misfires. And the planet can do that too. So we need to pay attention. We need to not keep sabotaging ourselves.
What concerns me, also something we saw on the Scripps News, was the Amazon, that they're just cutting down the forest. And it's
they're cutting the forest down everywhere.
Are you kidding?
We are, if we think that doesn't change the condition of the plants, it changes the humidity, it changes everything about that ecosystem. Not to mention that there are obviously animals living in those trees.
Exactly.
And it's probably one of the more interesting things, and people can Google this and look at it, when they reintroduced wolves into the western part of the U.S.
Wyoming, yeah.
The rivers changed their flow pattern.
Wait a minute.
It actually changed the rivers. And the way that it went was that the wolves were eating some of the animals, and the change in the ecosystem changed who was the predator and where, and that changed the eating of the vegetation, which changed the flow of the river.
Whoa.
They've documented that, and they can see the impact of having released these wolves, which was an attempt at reestablishing a balance in that ecosystem because farmers had eradicated the wolves. And I get it that there needs to be a balance, that farmers need to be able to have their crops and their
Cattle
livestock.
and stuff. Yeah.
But there needs to be better ways to protect them from these natural predators and still allow the natural predators to do their job in the parts that are still wild. And there are people who are crying. There's a bobcat that's been sighted in our area. And yeah, I don't want it in my yard coming after my pets. But that's my job to keep my pets safe.
Correct.
Right? That's, that means, no, you can't just open the door and let the kid out and hope that it comes back. It means going out there and keeping an eye on, being the mother hen, if you will, while they're out and about, because they're not savvy enough to watch out for these things, and we just need to be.
Well, and I think of all the growth here.
Yeah.
And
they've got to adjust.
This is all their homes.
They've got to adjust, and they're going to live in amongst the homes, and the deer are going to live in amongst the homes, and the feral pigs are going to live in amongst the homes. We just, when we release something like that, like the love bugs, you're just not going to eradicate it quickly or easily. But you change, even when you do that, then the things that eat those can't rely on them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when we kill the mosquitoes that we don't like, all of the animals that eat mosquitoes and the things that eat the mosquitoes are then going to be hungry and starve.
It was interesting a few weeks back when I had mentioned that we saw a bunch of little bunnies around our place for the first time in a long time. You immediately said, yeah, because the big cats are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Changing the system.
Yeah.
And it's one of my colleagues at Kaiser talks about urban ecology, which is an interesting thing, urban ecosystems.
Yeah.
That what we have now in Port St. Lucie is not anything like what was here 50 years ago.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's totally different. The animals are different. The plants are different. All of that is different. We were talking about invasive plants. So, the pepper plants and the rain trees. And the rain trees are not quite as invasive. And what they do is they throw a lot of seeds out that are just really healthy, which is the same is true with the pepper plant. It's just the pepper plant kills the things around it so that it takes over. The rain tree doesn't do so much of that. It shows up everywhere and it's annoying. There's a few of them planted on the Pruitt campus. And so I'm forever seeing babies of that tree coming up in the middle of the shrubs and things, and they've got to constantly be after it. It's just a high maintenance to have in and around. And, it doesn't have to be you. It can be your neighbors that have the tree. Mm-hmm. And I happen to like the tree. I think it's very pretty. But I've got one of it planted in my backyard next to a Ponciana tree. And the two of them are having a battle over who gets which sunlight. And it's interesting to watch because the rain tree will put a sprig out between the Ponciana fronds and
sure
try to get some sunlight in there so it can continue to survive. It's losing the battle, but it's interesting. The Ponciana is huge in my backyard. And I probably would...
They're beautiful.
They are beautiful. So are the rain trees, actually. They're all beautiful. And the question is, do you take care of it? So one of the things that I do is I actually clean up the seed pods from the rain trees. But, of course, the birds and the animals help with that, too. And I've got verbena, which is another... I didn't plant that. That just showed up in a pot, probably courtesy of a squirrel or a bird. And that's how they have migrated. It's just that in Florida, there aren't as many natural antagonists for those plants. Although the verbena, I'm watching insects eat the seeds faster than the plant can mature them. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations to you on your Pruitt campus, a brand new nursing school.
Yeah, it's the nursing school there is opening, yep. And I've had to walk through the clouds of nursing students to get
I'll
to my
bet.
classes.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting.
Yeah, it's I think what Dr. Moore had mentioned that almost doubles, if not more than doubles, their graduates.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And we need them.
we need we need doctors. We need a climate that's more attractive to doctors here in Florida. But that's a whole nother story.
I was going to say, that's about 10 hours worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not something we want to really get into in the last 10 minutes of the show.
No, definitely not.
What can I say?
So let's talk about the book.
The book. So the book is out there, and you're welcome to look for it on Amazon. It's available. And I hope that it helps a lot of people. It talks about recovery from trauma. We all have life, as Dr. Strahan likes to say, life is traumatic. You can't live life without having trauma thrown at you. Trauma is anything that you have trouble absorbing. And when that happens, whether it's a wildfire like what's happening in Maui, that's traumatic to the people who live there. It's traumatic to people who know people who live there.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's secondary and tertiary trauma too. So primary trauma is when you experience or exposed to, witness a catastrophic event of some sort, whatever it is. It can be individual, it can be more community or global. Those are issues. Secondary trauma is if you're treating the person who either was injured or saw or experienced, whatever, had direct contact with the trauma. That's secondary trauma. And then tertiary trauma is the person who talks to the person who treated the person. So it carries on, and that, of course, is a major issue in counseling in the fields that I'm looking to get licensed in. And recovering from that, recognizing that you've been traumatized by hearing about the trauma of others is very important in self-care, because you have to recognize why you're having that weird reaction. It's not that something's wrong with you. Well, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to overcome. It's an obstacle, but it's not wrong per se. That's a weird word that we use. But it is something from which you can recover and heal and be resilient. Resiliency is not simply something you're born with and you have or don't have. You can learn to be resilient. The big key is wanting to be. The wanting to be healthy again, wanting to be happier, wanting to be all of those things. We all have times and periods of depression, of shock, of many different reactions to the traumas in our lives. And long-term trauma can be very harmful to your body. And there are things that you can do to make it better. You can dance, you can go for a walk in the sunlight, you can hug a puppy, many different things. The key is to find the things that work for you that don't harm someone else and help yourself heal and become resilient. Lots of different tips and tools in that book on what you can do, but also explaining how trauma works, what it does to our brains, how it changes our body chemistry. It does many, many things. I know I talked a show or two ago about witnessing that accident while I'm just driving down the road, and it was a trauma for me, because I witnessed the event.
And you were just out of your teen years.
Yeah, I was.
And you still talk about it.
And I still talk about it. I can still see it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't traumatize me anymore, but I still remember it. The things that are traumatic to you, you either push back and repress the memories, or they stay very vivid for you. They are part of the definition of your life, and they do change. Getting back to that DNA, they change what is expressed among your genetic material. So trauma can cause different genes to activate and others to shut down because of the chemical release in the trauma itself. And whether that trauma is direct primary, secondary, or tertiary, you're still going to have that effect. And it's not a sign of weakness to need some help. It's a sign of strength to know when to go and get some help, because the help is out there. There are people trained in helping you recover from trauma. And those are just healthy. Look at it as learning some healthy lifestyle skills. That's what therapy, that's what counseling does. It helps you build coping mechanisms that are healthy, forward looking and moving, and just help you be happier, more functional in life, regardless of what's happening.
And, you run into some people, and all they do is talk about the past.
Yeah, they live in the past. And the sad part about that is if you keep reliving the past, you keep re-traumatizing yourself.
Sure. That's got to
Right.
happen.
So until you get to the place of being able to talk about it from a teaching perspective, which is what I do with that story, I talk about it as an example. I'm no longer, I don't think there's any physical reaction to that. And that's part of it. So it's like, I'm going to take a quick flip. We've only got a couple minutes left, but it's kind of like when you're grieving somebody, when you can remember the good parts without the pain. That's the measure of your resilience and your healing from the trauma of the loss. When you lose somebody you love, that's trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's traumatic. And I was listening to one of the professors at the university, of the class that I'm taking, talking about losing her husband. And he died while he was on a business trip, so he wasn't even home.
Mm.
And she found out by a phone call that he had passed, and it was sudden. So I don't know the details. She didn't share the details, but she talks about the effect on her body of hearing that news.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because here's somebody you shared your life with, and you're expecting to grow old together, and boom, it's changed in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
And life
Literally.
does that. Yeah, and
Wow.
life does that to you. And so that kind of trauma is right here and now, and it's overwhelming, which makes it really a challenge for your system to do something with it. And you're going to shut down to some extent because your body is trying to cope with the news, with the information, with the change in life that's going to result from that. So it's a trauma at 17 levels, using a rough number, and that's very, very profound. And so anybody who loses somebody, grief is a special kind of trauma. We'll talk more about that, and hopefully in some trauma with Dr. Strahan next week.
That'll be cool. Yeah.
Meanwhile, this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb, and we do have Friday night services tonight at 7:30.